Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. Now, in our last video, we broke down tethers and individuals or groups imported to the Black experience, but not to strengthen it, but to dilute and redirect it. Now, the strategy has evolved. We've moved from cultural confusion to full-blown political takeover. So, as a distinction, I'll let this sister chime in very quickly. That way we can build a premise and I can contextualize what I'm referring to. I want you guys to listen in.
Americans, can you all educate Africans on why you all don't like to be called Africans? Instead, you want to be called Black Americans. You genuinely want to know as an African man.
So the short question would be, we're not African. And I know that there is an African somewhere around the world that is just cringing and just shaking in their skin every time they hear a Black American say that they're not African. But let me just explain this to you like this, because I feel like you're asking this question out of genuine curiosity and not trying to force an identity on a group of people that you probably really don't know anything about. Black Americans have been in this country for hundreds of years, okay? Generation after generation on this land, on this soil. I mean, we have pictures of great-grandparents who, from like the early 1900s, when pictures first became a thing, right? So there's nothing that we can reflect to or go back to that shows anywhere in Africa in our lineage. So everything that comes from Africa that's in our DNA is purely ancestral. It has nothing to do with culture or heritage or identity at all. Our identity is 100% with America, with the United States. It has nothing to do with we have no cultural ties to not one country in Africa. We don't know.
All right. So I'm going to let the sister finish, but I do want to chime in on some key points, because if we talked about how identity engineering is being used to erase foundational Black Americans from the National Ledger of Justice, in 2023, the U.S. Census Bureau quietly announced it will begin testing new racial categories, merging Black and African American and Afro-Caribbean into one, allowing respondents with any African ancestry to check Black. Now, this means that someone from Tunisia, Brazil, or even the UK who's never lived under Jim Crow redlining or mass incarceration, or even in present-day modern discrimination and racism that a lot of Black Americans still face, can now statistically replace the descendants of American slavery. That's not representation, that's erasure. Now, the purpose of this redefinition is data camouflage. And this is, of course, in my opinion, because when the federal government counts everyone as Black, it can claim success on Black progress while leaving foundational Black Americans locked out of actual wealth, contracts, and even justice. So, for example, a 2022 Brookings report showed that median household wealth for African immigrants was 5 times higher that of Black Americans descended from slavery, yet both groups are counted as Black progress. That's not progress, that's manipulation. That's not giving you the entire truth, because after the civil rights movement came basically the rise of diversity. And by the 1980s, think tanks like the Heritage Foundation and the Brookings Institute began replacing language about Black equity with minority opportunity. That one word, minority, it became the great escape hatch for accountability. Programs written for Black Americans after 400 years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow suddenly became open to anyone, immigrants, foreign exchange students, or newly naturalized citizens under the label of diversity. That's how you turn reparations into multiculturalism and justice into PR. Let's get back into the video.
Anybody over there, we don't have no friends over there, we don't have no family over there. The only thing that we share in common with Africans is our skin colors and some of us and some facial features. That is like the only thing. So I think that when Africans look at us, knowing that we have an ancestral tie to the continent through the transatlantic slave trade, I feel like a lot of you guys just don't understand why we don't feel connected, why we don't want to identify with Africa in the same way that you do, not realizing how identity works. Why would we identify with an entire continent, right? Y'all always say, oh, Africa's a continent, not a country, remember? And nobody said it was a country. But we don't like we don't have any ties at all, no connections for hundreds of years. So it wouldn't even make sense for us to identify as an African when that word means nothing to us, because I'm not from there. I don't have no family, no friends. I don't know y'all. It's no disrespect unless you started with me first, but I'm not from there. So I can't identify with no specific place over there, no specific people, tribe, nothing. And then y'all have to keep in mind that we are our own unique ethnic group, just period. We share DNA with a lot of different groups around the world. The natives, some European DNA. We have African DNA. Some of us have Asian DNA. So we're a combination of a lot of different things that make us who we are, and we've kind of developed our identity through generations upon generations just in the Americas. So it doesn't make sense for a Black American to call themselves African when that vague term means absolutely nothing to us, and it has no substance at all. It might mean everything to you as an African because you come directly from there. You have memories of that place, or either that or your parents or your grandparents have memories of that place. If you want to go over there to some specific country, you can go over there and kick it, speak the language, and just fit right in culturally. We don't have that type of connection. So why would I call myself something that I don't have no connection to? I mean, if you want to talk about an identity crisis, that would be an identity crisis, because you calling yourself by something that you don't even know about. You don't know nothing about.
That was a very powerful piece by that Sister Cash. Go look on her TikTok if you guys want to follow her, just want to support her. I just found this clip. I thought it was very powerful, very short. I think she said a lot in the time given. So I wanted to highlight that and kind of give as a premise to be more contextualized on this particular topic, because when I look at nonprofits and even NGOs flooding the political space under the banner of Black and Brown unity, but behind that particular language of solidarity came financial substitution. Now, according to the IRS filings, over $230 million in racial equity funding from major corporations after 2020 went to organizations led by non-foundational immigrants or multi-ethnic boards, basically not grassroots Black American movements, basically. And the face of that struggle changed, and with it, the control, because universities replicated the trend. They had DEI programs replace Black studies with African diaspora programs, imported global narratives that blurred lineage-based demands. So DEI wasn't just a governmental program that benefit mostly white women, and that's a fact. But it was under the guise that it helped and supported Black Americans, which we were at the bottom of that support. But in the colleges and university, it changed the curriculum from Black studies or Black American studies or even African American studies to African diaspora programs that benefit African immigrants. And even tech hiring reports show the shift. Companies like Google and Meta report Black hiring up by 50%, but yet internal data show most of those hires are from Africa or the Caribbean nationals. That is why they can be very disrespectful. Not all African immigrants, not all Caribbean immigrants, but a good portion of them that spoil the bunch will come over and say, we make more money than you, we do better than you, but you guys are tethers. See, if we untether the line, you guys will fall, fail, and sink. That's what you guys are not understanding, that we have paved the way for all immigrants, but those who can blend in and skin in, and because they can cosplay, these are the ones when they get to a high position or they believe a level of success, these are the ones who are being very disrespectful and discouraging because they don't have the same ancestry. And these are some of the same ones that will call us slaves. You guys are just slaves. Like, wait a minute. Current in U.S., unless you're in jail, you're not a slave. But nonetheless, this is a very disparaging, deflammatory term that they use. Is almost equivalent, in my opinion, of a non-Black person calling you the N-word. And in some regards, I've even heard African and Caribbean immigrants calling a known Black American the N-word as a degrading term. We're like, well, in that case, we're all the N-word in this particular country, but they believe that they're different. They believe that they're better. Even in my comment section, someone told me that, yeah, Dominicans are not black, Dominicans are not African, or on some of that lines. And I basically gave them the information stating that Dominicans are a mixture of different people, because again, we have to look at Dominicans today, not the native Dominicans of that land. Dominicans today are a mixture of 3 or 4 different types of people. You guys are a mix of the native Dominicans that was on that land prior to. You guys are a mixture of the Spanish conquistadors that conquered that land. You guys are a mixture of the Tainos, and you guys are a mix of African slaves. That's why you have, whether it be Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic, you have a blend of different shades, colors, and tones of people, depending on their lineage lines and how they mix. Yeah, there's a great portion of Dominicans that are light skinned, but then there's Dominicans that are dark skinned, just as well as in Puerto Rico. Now, what they show to the world is that majority of Puerto Ricans are a light brown skin or white skin that they can kind of blend in with Caucasians, just as well as Dominicans. When you look at the presidents and the governmental officials, a lot of them are light skin or white skin to show that this is a country of white people, which is absolutely not. Unfortunately, Spanish conquistadors went around the world and conquered all these lands and mixed with African slaves, mixed with Tainos and Native Americans, and mixed with the native people of that land. So they have an identity politics, because if someone wants to say, well, you're not attributing to your blackness, well, the same way we view blackness is probably different than what they view blackness. But I would like to ask a dark-skinned Dominican, what do they label themselves as? Because believe it or not, they receive a lot of discrimination and racism in their country as well. And when I look at these programs, going back to the college comment about these DEI programs that now favor African diaspora versus Black American study, this isn't representation, it's displacement through statistics. To understand this, we have to really go back to 1965. When you look at the Hart-Celler Immigration Act, before 1965, immigrants from Africa and the Caribbean made up less than 1% of the Black population. Now, if you guys want to research that term, again, that Immigration Act was the Hart, H-A-R-T, Celler, C-E-L-L-E-R Immigration Act. Because prior to that, it was only 1% of African and Caribbean immigrants in America that made up the Black population. Now, by 2020, that number jumped to over 10%. And among college-educated Black Americans, immigrants now make up nearly 1/3. So it's not a coincidence. It's a cold war engineering, in my opinion. And America wanted to showcase itself as a post-racial democracy during decolonization. So it imported elite Black immigrants to soften the image of domestic racism. And don't forget, when I went to a lot of these countries, I've been to the Caribbean, very beautiful countries, very wonderful people. I've been to 3 countries in Africa so far. Very wonderful people, very beautiful countries. Again, if they can, increase and upgrade their infrastructure to a certain degree, and probably do a whole governmental overhaul, because they will state that they have a lot of governmental corruption in their countries. But they have great land, great resources that they can do a lot with. But majority of the countries in Africa, a lot of their people live in squalor, live in poverty. You think that you grew up in the ghetto? You think that you grew up in a hood? You will not survive in Africa. You will not survive in their shanty towns and their favelas and their slumlord towns. You will not survive, because they're literally living in sheet metal. A lot of these towns. When I went to South Africa, my family and I, we went to Cape Town, South Africa, a couple of years back, and we were getting driven from the airport to our hotel. And there was a portion of the stretch, and it was probably about 5 miles, this particular area in the city, in the city ordinance, 5 miles of this slums. And I was like, damn, because I was thinking about the apartheid. Now, of course, I wouldn't be able to visit during the apartheid, because I probably would have been scooped up. But nonetheless, after the apartheid, now I think the apartheid, don't get me wrong, okay, I'm just trying to do it from memory. I think the apartheid ended in the 60s, late 50s, 60s, some time frame. Correct me if I'm wrong. But nonetheless, we're talking about what, 40, 50 years, almost 60 years now. I would like to believe they would have cleaned up a lot of those towns, maybe built maybe some small, tiny homes that are renovated and modernized. But no, unfortunately, as a lot of the country men and women will state there, that their governments are corrupt. So I wonder what are they doing in their homeland. And again, America, we always recruit the top talent, no matter where they are. If you believe that there's this immigrants from the Caribbean, Africa coming to America and working hard, doing Uber, no, they're taking the top talent because, yeah, they may be doing Uber, but they're also taking a lot of high-tech jobs, service jobs, and product jobs. And the reason why they're not in their country is because they fled their country, because they couldn't make a way in their country, because they couldn't do economic or political change in their country. So they come here, turn up their nose, be disrespectful, and say how smart they are, how hardworking they are. They say all these really discouraging terms to Black Americans. And I'm like, well, hardworking would be in your country, would it not? Because you would have built up something in your country, not come to someone else's country using the legislation and policies and regulations that one group of people paved the way for you and other immigrant groups to come over and benefit from. Now, of course, a lot of this comes by the way of our ancestors, thinking that by doing these very large legislations in order to open the gates to African and Caribbean immigrants to come over, that there would be some sort of reinforcement to stand 10 toes down with us on the fight against white supremacy and strengthening the ranks. But no, the federal government has a bigger ploy. Those who came over, they made sure that they looked at Black Americans as Akatas and Jurias and Abibs and anything that they deem less than, that they are better, that they are more hardworking, that they are more intelligent, that they believe the white supremacy ideology that we are low IQ and lazy and welfare kings and queens. So to me, ladies and gentlemen, there is no surprise that a lot of these institutions like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the U.S. think tanks funded exchange programs designed to export American capitalism and import compliant Black voices. This is the Democratic Party that you guys are looking at. When you guys look at these Black faces, I want you guys to research and define who they are and where they're from. Now, just because they were born in America, I want you to research their parents. Where are their parents from? What are their ideology? Because believe it or not, a lot of Black Americans, even though traditionally, ever since Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, they were voting Democrat. But the ideologies of a lot of Black Americans are very conservative, traditional family conservative, not Republican. I don't want politics to interfere with the terminology I'm stating. A conservative mindset, traditional family, God and home, and, you know, husband and wife and children, so on and so forth. Those conservative values, okay, that Republicans take a hold to. But again, we vote liberal, which goes against our best interests, because it seemed as though that a lot of liberals supported mass illegal immigration and abortions and welfare. But a lot of us have been duped and tricked by the Democratic Party. And guess what? Those Black voices that you guys hear, again, define them. See where they're from, their parents from, because I promise you, there's a great portion that are not from this country. So I believe a brilliant example is described in Mary Cold War Civil Rights book, that race and the image of American democracy is very different. And the goal is to replace confrontation with cooperations, because they know that foundational Black Americans are very confrontational when our rights are being put up on public display and being basically taken away. But they know that this new Black demographic, or this new African and Caribbean demographic that has really risen in numbers over the past years, that is included with the black population has quietly been replaced, and that the confrontation of Black Americans fighting for our rights and marching and protesting is being replaced by Black voices on TikTok and X and YouTube and all these social media platforms, to cooperate and to fall in line. And America would never be what it is today without foundational Black Americans. And that goes for every single American of the achievements that we made simply by our voices. They just want complicity. They don't want confrontation. Because today, minority businesses, enterprises, and certifications really blur our lineage. You have Nigerian tech startups, Dominican contractors, and North African LLCs that qualify as Black-owned businesses under the U.S. Small Business Administration definitions. And they're the ones that are getting the contracts. They're the ones that's getting the funding, not Black American businesses. And meanwhile, foundational Black Americans who built the labor infrastructure of this country, we receive less than 2% of federal contracting dollars. And they know exactly who they're dealing with. The only thing that you have to do is look at their names. You will have a name like Robert Adebayo. That's a Nigerian fellow. You will have a guy named like Omarion Gonzalez. So we have to understand how these things are being done in very plain sight. But they would tell you that there's Black progress. But the Black progress that they're talking about is for non-foundational Black Americans. And in politics, the same playbook continues because immigrant activists are elevated to speak for the Black vote. We have all these non-foundational Black Americans speaking for Black folk. Look at Kamala Harris. Oh, I know I got some of you mad with that. But we have to understand that we cannot redefine Blackness. We cannot redefine Black Americans. Because if you don't understand from Tethers to Takeover and how the immigrant narratives erase foundational Black Americans, and if you don't understand that white supremacies take both sides of the argument, and I'll give you one more. If you do not understand white supremacy, then you'll never understand anything else. Because they have a lot of Black immigrant activists that are elevated to speak for the Black vote. You guys remember when they had Trina and Saucy Santana and they made up that whole entire song, No Vucking, No Vote? Think about that. Think about Get Your Booties to the Polls, and they use overweight, out of shape strippers to do so. I just want you to think about the public voices we have in the Senate and in Congress that are from other countries, like Hakeem Jeffries. Look at his lineage. Look at Ilhan Omar. Look at her lineage. And some of the rights and policies and regulations and legislation that they try to pass into law. We don't have a shared struggle. So they don't have the same causes in Congress. But through institutional sponsorship. Yeah. You'll see them on MSNBC and CNN, fluent, funded, and far removed from the lineage of freedmen. When every cultural claim Blackness, a lot of people in these spaces are cosplaying. But I want you guys to ask yourself this question. What happens to our memory? The music, the marches, the martyrs, rebranded as global Black culture. Juneteenth becomes multicultural. Hip hop becomes universal. Jamaicans created hip hop. Puerto Ricans created hip hop. They're now trying to steal every single thing we've ever done and that we've always been known to create. Slowly but surely, the debt that America owes to foundational Black America, it disappears. So this dilution is not diversity, it's data warfare. If you erase the data points, what evidence do you have? What claim do you have that you created this, that you struggled this, that you've done this, that you've done that? We have none. That is why they're erasing certain terminologies and certain history out of the books and out of the museums. We will be a forgotten people. And they're using people who look like us and share the same skin tone to do so. That's why tethers are so darn dangerous. And I'm not speaking about every African immigrant. I'm not speaking about every Caribbean immigrant. I'm speaking about those tethers, and they know who exactly they are. Because when you erase our lineage, you erase the liability of this country that they owe to us. The fight is not to exclude other, it's to define ourselves. Because just as the Cherokee Nation, the Japanese American Citizens League, and the Holocaust Claims Conference fought for lineage-based justice, I want you guys to think about that. All the Native American tribes that receive reparations still to this day, and I know I'm gonna have a lot of people in the comment section, black and non-black, talking about, we don't owe you reparations. You're not going to have reparations with my dollars. But every single time I bring up Native Americans, not Native Americans who've been put in detainment camps 100 years ago, we're talking about today, 2025, 2024, 2023, all the way back to the 40s and 50s. Native Americans have been receiving reparations from this country by the way of our tax dollars. I'm not pocket watching them because foundational Black Americans are owed. We don't deserve it. Oh, no, we don't deserve it. We are owed reparations, cash money. Because when I talk about other groups like Japanese American Citizen League, they got reparations from America. Holocaust Claim Conference for lineage-based justice. Not only did Holocaust survivors that came to America receive reparations from America and Germany, but even with Barack Obama was in office, even with Joe Biden was in office, Holocaust descendants receive reparations from this country. So we have two groups of people in this country that are still receiving reparations each and every year from this country. And that's Holocaust survivors' descendants, as well as those 500 federally recognized Native American tribes. So what must foundational Black Americans assert their legal and historical specificity? What must we do? But because, believe it or not, the solution isn't anger. It's not anger. It's not getting mad. It's not being frustrated. It's architecture. That's what it really is. Lineage-based data tracking separate from Pan-African categories. Tracing people's lineage back. Legislation recognizing the descendants of U.S. slavery as a distinct protected class. Reparation commission, state and federal, that use lineage verification, not ethnicity checkboxes. Cultural institutions that teach that the specific history of American freemen, not generalized Blackness. This isn't about hate. It's about the truth. It's about precision. It's about protection. Because when you define but how you look at the definition, it slowly disappears. But we have to look at how our destiny may follow. So America can never repay what it refuses to define. And that's why they're trying to erase it. They're erasing it in many strategic methods that we look at, replacing us with African and Caribbean immigrants, as well as through text when it comes to colleges, university programs, when it comes to museum and textbooks. Foundational Black Americans honor a flavor of diversity. We are the foundation of the Republic. And until our lineage is recognized, repaired, and respected, no other coalition can stand on solid ground. I want you guys to remember that. Because here on Blacklogic, this is where the power speaks the truth.